Hello, this is Margarita Monet from Edge of Paradise, and you are listening to the Metal Pit Podcast.
Welcome to the Metal Pit Podcast, where we delve deep into the albums and bands that shaped metal. Please visit our website, The Metal Pit, which is www.themetalpit.org, where you can find album reviews, interviews, and live show reviews. And all the podcasts. There's a podcast page on there too to see all the episodes you might have missed if you're just catching us now. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at The Metal Pit. And for some video interviews and video shorts, you can check out our YouTube page, which is youtube.com at the Metal Pit 666. And I have a few new things to mention. I made a new email for the podcast. So if you want to email the podcast and me directly, Blake, your host most of the time, if you have any comments, suggestions, maybe you want to be a guest on the show or something, especially if you're in a metal band, because we're going to do more of that in the future. And that's podcast at themetalpit.org. And I have created a new Instagram for our podcast. So if you're on Instagram, follow us at the Metal Pit Podcast. And one more thing, if you're on Spotify, I just created a playlist for the Metal Pit website. So if you're on Spotify, search for the Metal Pit playlist in there, and you can listen to new tracks. And there's some tracks from albums that we've reviewed recently on the website and a few classic tracks in there. And I even put one in about the album we're going to talk to today. But first, I'm going to mention my guest, who is Eric, who is one of the contributors on the Metal Pit. How you doing today, Eric?
I am doing outstanding, Blake. How are you doing on this rainy Saturday, at least raining here in Virginia?
Well, it's supposed to be sunny and warm here in Canada, Ontario,
lucky,
Canada, where I am.
Lucky you. All right.
Yes. And also, I have mentioned we're going to have more guests coming up, and I think I'm not going to say who's next in case, people cancel and stuff like that. But, I got trying to line up somebody in Finland, somebody in Sweden, somebody in the United Kingdom, and I think somebody in the United States too. But it's just got to schedule and figure out what's going on. Okay. So we're gonna go wait now. So we kind of rushed this because I had another podcast planned, but it just didn't work out for the date. So I got Eric, my friend here for many years, to join me. So it's kind of last minute. Can you do this with me? So I thought we'd go back to when I was 10 years old and get my favorite album from when I was 10. Okay, I didn't listen to this when I was 10, but anyway, we're going back to 1976. And we're going to do Rainbow, and we're going to do Rainbow Rising, or I don't know if the album's called Rising or if the album's called Rainbow Rising. There's some confusion with that. But anyway, so just one thing, if anybody doesn't know who Rainbow is, because if you're young, you might not know. Now, maybe you might not know Deep Purple either, but of course there was Deep Purple, and Ritchie Blackmore was a guitarist in Deep Purple for many years, and then he left Deep Purple and he formed his own band, Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, which is what the first album is called, and then they just changed the name for this one, which is their second album, to Rainbow. And let's see, and Ritchie Blackmore, he only kept Ronnie James Dio from the first album, and he recruited drummer Cozy Powell and bassist Jimmy Bain and keyboard player Tony Carey to complete the new lineup for this album. And it was recorded in Germany, and it was overseen by producer and engineer Martin Birch, who is kind of a legend in hard rock heavy metal producing. Rainbow has 8 studio albums. The first 3 were with Dio on vocals, then Graham Bonnet of Alcatraz fame, if you want to call it that, was on their 4th album, and then Joe Lynn Turner was on the next 3, and the final album had Doogie White on vocals, whose name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure where I heard that name before, because honestly, for me, I only listened to the 3 albums with Dio myself. How about you? When did you first hear Rainbow, and what about any other, did you listen to any of the other Rainbow albums besides the Dio ones?
Well, Blake, I've got to say, I'm actually, I'm walked the same path where I just listened to the Dio releases. Tough question. When did I first hear Rainbow? For me, I would say in the 80s, definitely. I would say probably like mid to late 80s, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, like 85, somewhere around there. Um, and the voice stood out to me. And I remember hearing some Black Sabbath and some Dio solo. And I tell you what, I scooped it all up. I mean, Ronnie James Dio, his voice is just. I was having this discussion with a friend. He's got one of the best voices, easily top 5, maybe top 3 in all music genres, not just metal music. So, but back to your question, probably somewhere around maybe 84, 85 is when I first heard Rainbow, and I liked what I heard. How about you, Blake? When was the first time? You got a few years on me, but when was the first time you heard them?
Yeah, this is one question that when I started the podcast like over a year ago, and the first few episodes we did, it was easy for me to answer this question because like as Master of Puppets was the first one we did, and I remembered exactly when I got it. And Number the Beast was an early one, and I remembered exactly when I got that. But now as we go on, it's like, geez, when did I first hear this? And so I'm not really even sure. I'm assuming I probably heard Deep Purple first, I would guess, even though, because I didn't really get into heavy metal. Even this is kind of before heavy metal, but in like 1982 is when I first discovered heavy metal. But I would hear stuff on the radio, but I'm sure there was no Rainbow songs on the radio. There were probably Smoke on the Water from Deep Purple was probably on the radio, and I remember hearing that for sure. But again, I would say it was probably in my 80s also, but I can't really say for sure. I can't remember that far back to whether it was after I discovered heavy metal and then I went, oh, who's this Rainbow or whatever Dio thing? Or so I can't even answer my own question that I always ask.
It definitely goes back, right?
Yes. If I knew 30 years ago that I was going to have a podcast 30 years later, I would have wrote all this stuff down.
Fortune teller on the podcast.
But because we didn't have a phone back then to do it on, but I could have wrote it on. But anyway, yeah. Now this album is one of the, like I heard that I read, I mean, as I'm trying to do some quick research that, Rob Halford praises it as one of the best albums ever and stuff. And it's like one of the first, it's really like you listen to this, if you didn't know, it wasn't like if you knew Dio but didn't know Rainbow and then you heard this album, you'd probably think, oh, this sounds like a Dio album, just because there's a Dungeons and Dragons kind of feel in here with the lyrics. And it's one of the first albums that probably dealt with that kind of stuff in hard rock and heavy metal anyway, and maybe everything else, I don't know, but it probably influenced a lot of, and like you can definitely hear Dio's input with dragons and probably, I don't know, does he mention rainbows in here? I know he does.
He does, and they're fantasy elements.
Yeah, so, and we also have a Philharmonic Orchestra on this album, which we'll get to later.
Very cool.
But yeah, like you said, I said I'd never listened to anything else. I know other people like some of the Joe Lynn Turner stuff, but it was a little more commercial. And of course, after Dio left Rainbow, of course, he started his solo group, and we're going to get to that because I'll mention it now. Our top 10 list is going to be our top 10 Dio involved albums.
Yes.
And I don't think we have Elf on there. At least I don't have Elf on mine. Yes, I don't even think I've ever heard that yet. That is one of his first groups. But of course, you watched the document. I've watched the documentary on Dio. I've watched the documentary on Ritchie Blackmore. And so there's lots of stuff, but I don't have any extra stuff written down because we threw this together the last minute. So we're going to get it. Now, there's only 6 songs on this album. As this was 76, maybe that was a common thing for shorter albums back then. But so yeah, we only have 6 songs to talk about, and we're going to start with Tarot Woman. I'll let you go first, Eric.
Well, starting this album off, you hear this really cool fade in with the keyboards. It's like a keyboard intro, and then you hear Blackmore's staccato rhythm guitar. You really hear this distinctive sound of, okay, this is what's to come on the full album. Man, Dio's voice is just so commanding when he comes into the verse there. The chorus obviously is great. Blackmore's solo is very slick. He uses a series of hammer-ons and pull-offs. The one thing that's pretty cool, I like, which you hear more bands do it. I don't even know so much now, but I think it was a thing of maybe about 15, 20 years ago. But Ritchie Blackmore brings that vocal melody that Dio has in the chorus, and he utilizes that on his guitar solo at the end. And then the keyboard player and Blackmore do this pretty nice like harmony section. And Terra Woman's like one of those tunes. I was kind of stunned. I heard it on Ozzy's Boneyard on Sirius XM once. And they'll typically play like the same 2 or 3 Dio songs and maybe 1 or 2 Sabbath songs that he's done. Children of the Sea gets played a decent fair amount for good reason. And Heaven and Hell as well. But Terra Woman's, it's a great tune. It's one of my 2 favorites off this album. Granted, there are only 6 songs, like you mentioned, Blake.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my take on Terra Woman.
Yes, I love even though I'm not really a big keyboard fan, but of course, back in the 70s, Deep Purple, Rainbow, whatever. And of course, Dream Theater. I don't mind their keyboards, but most of the time, I'm not a big keyboard guy. but yeah, I really like the start of the song. Oh, now I lost my spot. Sorry. I really like the start of the song with that keyboard intro, and then Ritchie comes in, and of course Dio's vocals and everything. Oh, I was going to ask you, as you were talking there, were you much of a Deep Purple fan at all, or before this, or whatever?
I had my sister was pretty keen on Deep Purple. I had some friends that liked Deep Purple. I never really got into them too heavily. Blackmore obviously influenced some of the greats like Yngwie Malmsteen and many other guitar players that I looked up to playing guitar. But I wasn't a big Deep Purple fan. I don't dislike them because I feel like they have their place. They've impacted so many bands, and I told you a while back in a text. I mean, I probably just need to go back and listen to A Perfect Strangers, or maybe queue up that live album you had mentioned to me. But to answer your question, I wasn't a super big Deep Purple fan. Just hooked on Dio. I mean, from the first lyric word that I heard from him, I was like, this guy is just an absolute rock star,
No, I was now again, I can't remember the timeline from what I listened to first, or if it was all at the same time, because if I didn't really discover some of this stuff after I get into heavy metal, and it's like, oh, this is what started heavy metal or whatever, it could have all been thrown at me at once. But I did like Deep Purple's Machine Head album is one of my favorite albums of all time, and that's definitely one. Of course, it has Smoke on the Water on it. I know people are sick of that song, but whatever. That's on there. And Highway Star, of course, and Lazy, which
good tune.
3 or 4 minute keyboard thing on there. But yeah, so I loved Ritchie Blackmore, and of course I didn't know Dio at the time until I heard if I heard the Rainbow first, I could have even heard Dio's solo album first, for all I know. So I can't even honestly say for sure what I heard first. But yes, I was a big Deep Purple fan, so if I did hear Dio's solo stuff before this, like, how could I go wrong with Ritchie Blackmore and Ronnie James Dio in the same band?
No doubt.
Gonna like it. So anyway, Terror Woman, yes, that's one of my favorite songs on the album too. I mean, yeah, like you said, 6 songs. So now we go to the second track, Run with the Wolf. I'll let you start on every song, I guess.
Okay, yeah. So Rainbow deliberately slows things down here. Terror Woman's got a pretty driving, rhythm to it. This tune, Run with the Wolf, we're slowing things down. They really lay down this bluesy kind of groove. I think it fits pretty well. It's not one of my, again, it's a short album, but I like the song. I like some of the musical parts, and Dio sounds great. I didn't write much at all about this song, so that's pretty much it. I think it's a pretty good tune.
Yes, it's kind of like your quintessential rock track, I guess. And of course, Dio's vocal. I mean, I could say good things about Dio's vocals for every song, I guess, on this. And I could say the same thing for the guitar solos. And actually, the whole band is awesome. This is I don't know if I put this because we did a top 50 album list. I don't know if I put this on my list. If I didn't, I probably should have, because as I re-listened to it, and I still listen to it regularly once in a while. I do love this album. Now, yeah, and that song, maybe not one of the best songs on the album, out of the six, whatever. But yes, I don't really, there's not like a song on here that I don't like. But yes, it's very blues influenced or infused, whatever, in the song by Ritchie. And it's kind of a, it gives you a shorter piece compared to a couple of longer songs that we're going to get to later. Then we go to, do I have this right? Starstruck. Is that the next one? Yes.
You got it.
Okay. What do you think of Starstruck?
Starstruck. So this one, I really dig this song. It had been a while since I've heard this album. That's why I wanted to give it a quick spin last night. You reached out to me, and I was actually at Starbucks before I headed out to teach some guitar. And I was like, okay, I got to make a note. It's been a while since I've listened to this album. And this is one I was like, what, this is probably the most bluesy song on the album. And I like some blues. I'm definitely more on the hard rock, metal. I like a lot of neoclassical kind of stuff. But I really dig kind of the angle the band's going for here. And the rhythm section's excellent. The chorus, the lady starstruck, she's nothing but magic, has this really infectious vocal melody and interplay with the guitar melody too. So you can see that Ronnie James and Ritchie have this instant chemistry, and it really shows on the song. And the guitar solo with the slide fits the song to a T. Good tune.
Now, don't quote me on this because I just read this, on the internet. But according to what I read, the lyrics of the song is about a fanatical groupie who kept following the band to every city they played in because she really liked Ritchie Blackmore. I guess she was a French girl, so I don't know if that means she's from France or Quebec.
Okay.
But anyway, it just says a French girl. And then one day, after finding out where he lived, she would show up sneaking around in the bushes at Ritchie's house, and he sent his dogs after her. And I guess supposedly that's what the song is about. So they try to take a funny take on it on Starstruck, which I guess makes sense. Starstruck. But anyway, yes, it is yes, and it's another awesome song. Again, I could say that for every song on it. And sorry, there's one part I forgot. He said that, after he sent his dogs after, he said that he would rather have invited her in for some tea, but I don't know if he did or not.
Regrets,
sure
right?
If she just wanted tea or not, but anyway.
But
now the next song, I don't mind the song. I just cringe at the idea of the song and the lyrics. But I still like the song. But anyway, it's Do You Close Your Eyes? So what do you think of Do You Close Your Eyes?
Yeah, so this is a solid mid-tempo rocker. It's a decent track. There's some more single note riffing. I like the intro particularly by Ritchie. Ronnie James Dio has a great combination of power and melody that he really expresses in this tune. It's a good song. What do you think of it?
I don't like sappy stuff, Do you close your eyes when you're making love? Like, okay. That sounds like it should be a ballad, actually, but it's not.
That's what I thought too, because I was looking over the album and I was like, it's been so long since I listened to it. I was like, is this a ballad? I was like, I don't recall it being a ballad, but yeah, by the title and like you said, the lyrics are kind of not that they're stronger, lyrics, but
Well, yeah, like I mean, it's 1976, of course, and Ritchie Blackmore wasn't necessarily evil or anything. So, of course, they have a love song in here, I guess you call it that. But it sounds like it's kind of similar to like an AC/DC song in a way. Not sounding like AC/DC, but that kind of a feel to it. But yes, and again, I don't dislike the song. I just dislike the lyrics, I guess you could say. That's just because I'm a man and I don't like those kinds of lyrics. Okay. Oh, shoot. And that was Do You Close Your Eyes? Okay. Then that was the end of side one, right? Now we go to side two, which only has 2 songs on it. And they're both like 8 minutes, I think, in length or so, close to it anyway. And we start with Stargazer. And do you like Stargazer?
Now we're talking. Yes, explosive drums with a nasty main guitar riff kick this number off. The synthesizers with the choir patch gives this piece an otherworldly feel. They do this during the verse. You can also pick up on some strings, and I think this is where Blake, you were talking about the Philharmonic comes in. You definitely hear it at the end, which I think is just a clever way to close out the song. It just gives it it almost gives it like a soundtrack. Like you could hear this during like some kind of a thriller or maybe even like a scary movie, like an outro to, it has a cinematic sound to it. But man, I mean, Ronnie James Dio for this era, mid 70s, he's never sounded so good. And Ritchie Blackmore really, I feel like he really takes control of the guitar and his moments on the song and absolutely shines with some blistering guitar work. He uses the harmonic minor scale. I'm going to get a little guitar nerdy with you and just let you know it's called the harmonic minor scale. And it gives it this exotic feel, which is really what he's going for in this tune. But yeah, just some really great, cool exotic flavor sounds for this tune, which really has kind of a darker, mysterious vibe to it. Great tune. This is one I could certainly listen to multiple times. And I actually heard this, strangely enough, on Sirius XM, and they'll play an epic. They'll play like longer songs, like I don't know if you want to call 6 minutes long epic. These days, it's not really epic, but Stargazer cracks the 8-minute mark, so I would call it epic. But they played that one. I've heard it once before on Sirius XM, and I was like, man, you just forget how great this song is. What did you think about that one, Blake?
Yes, I think this is probably my favorite song on the album, and we get to hear it's Cozy, right? Yeah, Cozy Powell's drumming at the start is very impressive for the start of this song. And it's and I would call it epic. I don't know, whatever. I like to use that word anyway. Because I always love my long songs, which I mentioned.
Oh yeah. Me
love,
too, guilty as charged.
Songs like these 3 or 4 minute just verse chorus solo verse chorus or whatever, kind of boring, too much of it. So it's nice and you get a long solo. I would say, I want to impress my guitar friend here, there's lots of sharps and flats in a solo. Would you agree? I read that somewhere.
Yeah, well played, Blake. All we need is a guitar behind you, and I wouldn't know
that. I wouldn't know that myself. I just read that. I thought, I better say this. Eric's on. Okay. And did you know that Dream Theater covered this song on I guess, their album Black Clouds and Silver Linings? I guess, I don't know if there was an extra CD if you bought the CD, because I didn't buy the CD probably. But have you ever heard that yet?
You know what? It's funny you bring that up, because the first one I think of as far as covers that they played on that album, and I didn't buy that CD. That's whatever the deluxe version of Black Clouds. So I bought the original, and the original has plenty to offer musically. Oh my gosh. But To Tame a Land is the first one that kind of stuck with me, because that's a super underrated Iron Maiden track, and that truly is an epic. But then, I heard Stargazer, and I was like, you know what? This is Rainbow. I know this song, and they do a good job. James LaBrie gets his share of flack, but he does a damn good job. I got to say that. And musically, those guys, they ooze with confidence and skill. It's a pretty strong cover.
Well, I know Dream Theater was influenced by Deep Purple for sure.
Oh, you can hear it.
They did a whole live thing of Deep Purple's Made in Japan, which you didn't mention the title, but Made in Japan, Deep Purple's classic live album.
That's right.
Dream Theater did the whole thing, every song, and I'm sure James LaBrie's not Ian Gillan, but it's still good. And of course, the whole band's amazing. So that was a great listen for me, especially since I knew the Dream Theater. Oh, sorry, hit a wrong button on my laptop. Anyway, I was going to mention, sorry, what song am I on? Damn. Sorry, I got confused.
No worries. No worries, Stargazer. Can I add something real quick about the
Yeah, sure. Go
influences?
ahead.
I read an interview quite a few years back, and Jordan Rudess, he did cite Deep Purple as a pretty big influence on his
Mhm.
playing.
Yes,
Yeah.
I could definitely hear that. John Lord, the keyboardist for Dream Theater, would have been or Deep Purple, I mean, would have been a big on the Dream Theater guys. I guess the song is about a wizard whose slave construct a tower at great cost, only for the wizard to fall to his demise. But anyway, this is one of the best songs on the album, I think. I probably already said that. And yeah, it has lots of sharps and flats. And then we go to the last track, which I guess is kind of a continuation, the lyrically a continuation of that song. And this song is called A Light in the Black. And what do you think of this?
Yeah, how do you follow up an epic? You play a fast song, no nonsense, no frills. And the band is really hitting on all cylinders on this song. Dio just really kills it during the chorus. The main riff, it might sound kind of strange, but like the main riff to me almost sounds like something Queen, or I don't know, Metallica is obviously a lot heavier, but it sounds like something like maybe Queen or early Metallica might have kind of scraped up. Metallica would have more power chords, but it
Mhm.
has something where you can hear the influence this song has had on artists in the late 70s and early 80s. It's a great riff overall. It's a good song. One thing I didn't write down, the bass fills are sick. I heard a couple of these runs and I was like, wow, I didn't have my earbuds in either. And if you can pick those up just from a sound bar, from a Bluetooth speaker, it was good. The mix, especially for 76, the mix is actually pretty, the levels are really pretty equal, I would say. But yeah, some really nice bass fills in there too. Blackmore has really just shows his classical knowledge of guitar. He uses some savvy arpeggios during the solo. Man, it's excellent. Really great guitar playing and musicianship by the whole band.
Yeah, I don't think it could have uh after Stargazer, you couldn't have put on like Do You Close Your Eyes or whatever as the next song, because I think it really would everybody would be like, oh, that song's I mean, I think this is back in the day when it mattered what order the songs were in. Of course, if you're on Spotify, you don't have to listen
Mm-hmm.
to them in order or whatever. But so I think the only way you could come after an epic song is with another epic song and another 7 or 8 minute song. And it is the same along. So I guess side two is like oh, I forget the word, but anyway, the lyrics
Like
kind of continue
fantasy,
on.
kind of
Yes.
fantasy inspired. Yeah.
Following the wizard's demise, the once guided slaves are adrift and they discover a beacon in the darkness, which I guess is a light in the black. And they found a new purpose in life, according to what I read. Now, I do like there's like a 3.5 minute instrumental interlude there in the middle, of course, which reminds you of some Deep Purple stuff, more so when they play live, or Led Zeppelin, they would play live and just play music in Dream Theater. When James would leave the stage for 10 minutes or whatever.
Get himself a drink and the band would just be ripping it up.
But anyway, yeah, so those are two great songs, and like I do wish the album is a little longer. I always wish albums that are only 33 minutes or something like that. This is I do like longer albums, but it's 1976, and I didn't compare it to the other three Dio led Rainbow albums for the timeline, but they're probably all around the same. But anyway, that's the end of the album, and yes, that's a great song too. And now, what would you rate this album out of 10?
It seems like each time it comes to rating, I always seem to have a bit of a difficult time. I actually was pretty quick to rate it last night, and I gave it a 7.5.
Mhm.
And I hate to dock it a little bit for the time length. I feel like if they could have put one more epic, or realistically maybe two more songs, I would have certainly bumped it up to an 8. I'd say a 7.5. I do enjoy the album. You know, Turret Woman and Stargazer are both brilliant songs. And the album is very influential on music in the 70s and even into the early 80s.
Yes, well, I'd give it I guess, yeah, I was gonna give it a 10 because
I knew you
I
liked
do
it more
love
than I
it,
did.
except for that
Yeah.
one lyric thing. But I guess I'll give it a 9. I'll be officially give it a 9. Just because, yes, if there was 2 more songs, as long as the 2 extra songs that were good as these 6, then it definitely would have been a 10, as I do prefer some, longer song or longer albums. I mean, like I say, like, and if you're like thinking of vinyl and you put your side 2 on, there's only 2 songs, and 15 minutes later you have to go change your album again. But that's for us old people. I don't know how many younger people are into vinyl like us old guys were. And anyway, now we talk about seeing them live. I never saw Rainbow live. I'm assuming you never did either.
I did not. I did not. You know what? It's funny you bring that up. That's like there was something on X a while back. Which band had you wished you had seen live, and obviously I never caught Randy Rhoads live, so he'd be at the top. But I feel like Rainbow would be like kind of a sneaky top 5 or top 10 definitely for me. As you'll hear in my top 10 list, I have some respect for Rainbow. I do love what Dio did solo and with Sabbath quite a bit. But yeah, it would have been cool to catch those guys live.
That would have been a good top 10 list, actually. 10 bands we wish we would have seen that we never seen. That could be a future top 10
future
list.
Podcast. There you go, Blake. I see the light bulb above your head right now.
But yeah, but I've seen, okay, so I haven't seen Rainbow, obviously, but you've seen Dio live before, right?
I have. Dio puts on one hell of a show.
Okay, so I've seen Dio a few times. I can't really remember. I've seen Dio a few times. I saw Heaven and Hell once,
me too,
for sure. And then, of course, I saw Deep Purple also a few times with Ritchie
cool.
Blackmore. So I've seen all these people. I've probably seen Cozy Powell as a drummer. I don't know what band was he in Dio too, wasn't he?
He was
at times.
He was. I can't recall which album or albums, but I'm pretty certain he did play with Dio at one point though.
Yeah, and who's Jimmy Bain? He was in Dio too.
Yes,
so
he definitely played with Dio.
So I think
he played. I want to say at least the first two albums with Dio. Yeah,
I would say maybe Tony Carey, the keyboard player, is the only one of this band I haven't seen live, probably, unless he was in a band. Didn't know. But anyway, so yeah, that's the album, and we can't really talk about it live, like I said. I guess we both would have heard some Rainbow song because Dio always threw in a little bit of Man on the Silver Mountain in his shows.
Great tune. Long live rock and roll.
Yeah. I don't know if he would have put any of these songs from this album, this live show. I can't remember now, but I know he did those other ones that I mentioned. And but yeah, and of course, yeah. I don't know, like, again, because I didn't really probably start listening to this till after they're already done being a band, probably, or at least Dio wasn't in the band anymore. So that's probably why I would never get the chance to see Rainbow with Dio, because they're already probably done before I even started listening to them. Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna do our top 10 albums with Ronnie James Dio, obviously, as the singer of the band. And I guess I'll let you go first.
Whew. All right. Well, here we go. So a little, a little side note here, and I'm not doing any runners up today. So yeah, my numbers 10 and 9, I just jotted them down right before we started the podcast. Top 3 weren't too bad, but let me go ahead and say number 10 for me is Dio Magica. This is an album I enjoyed. There's some good tunes on here. To me, at times, especially with his voice, his voice sounds like vintage Dio. I mean, it's amazing for how long ago he recorded that. But he still sounded really great. Pretty solid musicianship. Number 9, we have Sacred Heart by Dio. Some of your hardcore Dio fans might scoff at me and be like, "Hey, that needs to be up higher." That album had some good songs. Hungry for Heaven's pretty nice. The title track's excellent. Time to Burn's awesome. Really like that. That was I had a VHS tape, and that was actually one of the best songs I thought he played live on that particular cassette, video cassette. Number 8, Rainbow Rising. I feel like just for the influential, just the influences that they pulled, because it's kind of like, to me, I don't know, Blake, how you feel about it. I feel like that Rainbow Rising was like kind of like prog or progressive Dio, because you have some of the keyboard elements, but you still have some, some nice hard rock. I mean, some heavy drum playing there, and Blackmore could play some pretty nice riffs. But obviously, we covered Rainbow Rising, number 8. Number 7 this is one I talked to you about right before we started recording the episode. I really wanted to listen to the Heaven and Hell album before we hopped on here, but I remember that album really made an impact to me, and maybe it's just because of when it came out, but that Heaven and Hell album, man, it's almost like a doom album. I mean, a lot of it's really slow, it's heavy, it's pretty dark. I think it's an awesome album, and Adam and Evil, such a brutal opener, but I like that entire album. I actually learned a couple of those songs on guitar for fun. Number 6, speaking of slow and heavy, Black Sabbath, Dehumanizer. I know one of our fellow writers, Jim, is a big fan of this album, and you know what? 1992 had some pretty nice releases. You gotta push some of that grunge stuff aside. Dehumanizer is a mammoth of an album. After All is just a mammoth of a song. There are some great tracks on there, and Ronnie James Dio, man, I don't know if he's ever sounded so good. Number 5, Dream Evil. I really like the direction that Dio went after Sacred Heart. I like Sacred Heart; it was pretty good, but Dream Evil, to me, kind of just the band sounded a little more rejuvenated to me. I like every song on there. Sunset Superman is brilliant. That's a fantastic song. I like the whole album. I even like All the Fools Sailed Away. And yes, it's a ballad. And MTV wouldn't even play the whole stinking song because it has a keyboard solo. It's probably a couple minutes long, but I like that album from opener to closer. Then we really get into the nitty gritty. I said it was easier. These were really not that easy. Number 4, I'm going to go with Last in Line, which, Blake, I don't know if you recall, you and I did this one. We did this podcast. This was one of my first, maybe it was my first, but one of my first podcasts with you. I gave it an 8, which I think is actually not right. I got to say it's probably 8.5. It's probably 8.5 or 9, honestly. Again, that album that's a landmark album. Anybody that claims to be a metalhead, you need to have this album. That song alone is worth the price of admission. Number 3, Black Sabbath, Mob Rules. I feel like it could be even a little bit higher. Sign of the Southern Cross, one of my top 5 metal songs of all time. Just a great album. I like it, everything about Mob Rules. You got the cat from what's his name? You got the cat from Rage Against the Machine. I know the guitar player, he was really keen. He kind of did his own thing on Mob Rules. A couple bands have covered that song, but it's a great album through and through. Number 2, it was a bit of a conundrum for me. I would say next week I might have a different answer, but I went with Holy Diver here, which I will say without hesitation is a 10 out of 10 album for me. The song, the album, I Speed at Night, Don't Talk to Strangers, the whole album, 10 out of 10, Holy Diver. I would say it's probably Dio's best vocal performance. He sounds great on everything he's done. That's the amazing thing about him. You got to give props to the guitar playing as well. Campbell does some amazing things. The rhythm section's great. Number 1, I got to go with one of my all-time favorite albums and songs, Heaven and Hell, Black Sabbath. This one, for some weird reason, when we were ranking our top Sabbath albums on that podcast a while ago, I'm not really sure why it wasn't my number one, but it has to be. It just has to be, just because the quality of songs, the last 3 to 4 songs on the album aren't the strongest, and I still stand by that, but they do belong on the album and they fit it well. But when you have Neon Nights, great track, very driving. Iommi at his finest. I mean, they really just, it's basically like a Runaway Train. I mean, such a great track. But I don't know if you know this little tidbit. I think some of your Sabbath fans, Dio fans, are going to know this, but that I did read this part recently, but I knew that Ronnie James Dio and Tony Iommi and Sabbath, the first song that they wrote together was Children of the Sea. I did not know, I read this yesterday, they wrote this the first day in the studio together. So I thought that was kind of a cool nugget. I actually covered that in one band, and the singer actually could do it pretty nice. And you know what? That's a tough vocalist to try to cover, but what a great tune. And what a masterful album. And Heaven and Hell's one of my favorite. I mean, such an influential song. What an influential song, pardon me. Great tune. Awesome vocals. Great orchestration. I love how they go into that double time. They really push the tempo. It's just such a hungry song. But yeah, if you claim to be a heavy metal fan and you don't own Heaven and Hell, you're lying to yourself. And that's my top 10.
Okay, a second. I have to make a change on my list. Okay, now of course we're gonna have some repeats because there's only so many albums with Dio on them. I mean, there's lots of albums, but I mean, of course, the top ones are gonna jump up. Now, when I made my list, I just quickly went from memory, thinking, okay, like this one. Then I thought, okay, I only have 9. Then I had to kind of open up my Spotify and look through the discographies and think, because it has been a while. Like I haven't listened to Magica, which you had on your list. I haven't listened to that in a while. So obviously I didn't have time to go back and listen to all the Dio albums that maybe I didn't listen to a whole lot. But anyway, so my number 10, I put Killing the Dragon because I just looked at my list and thought, I remember I do like this album. I mean, nice. I do like Magica. I do like Master of the Moon too. Mm-hmm. But anyway, this is the one from 2002 that made my number 10 on my list. And number 9, I got The Devil You Know by Heaven and Hell, which of course you mentioned, 2009. And I seen that in concert. Now it's been a while since I listened to that, but definitely had to include one of those on here, or that one on here, because they only made one, right? Album?
You're right.
Yes, right.
Yeah, sadly just one release, but wow, it packed a punch.
But yeah, I did see them in live doing that stuff, and probably, I can't remember. It's been too long. I'm sure they did some Black Sabbath songs. I don't think they would have did any Dio songs.
I saw that same tour. Yeah, and they played Falling Off the Edge of the World. I remember that.
Yeah. And my number 8, I got Mob Rules, 1981. I don't really have to say anything. You already did. Well, because I'm not as big as Black Sabbath fan as you are. Because my favorite Black Sabbath album is Born Again, but I know that everybody hates that, but I don't care. Anyway, my number 6 is Dream Evil, because because you meant I don't have Sacred Heart on my list because I thought it was a little more, commercial like, but that is a tour. That is one of the tours I saw, was the Sacred Heart tour. So back then I loved it, but just now I just don't go back and listen to Sacred Heart very much. I would rather listen to Dream Evil if I'm going to go back to, not counting the first 2 Dio albums, which we'll get to in my list. That was 10. That was 6. That was 7. Sorry. Now number 6 is I got Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, which is the first Rainbow album. As I mentioned before, it was called Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, and then he switched to just Rainbow after that. That was 1970. But that was also 1976. 2 albums in the same year. Nobody does that anymore. But anyway. And then I also have Rainbow at number 5, which Long Live Rock and Roll was 1978. And then my number 4 is Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath. And you already said anything about that. Yes, Heaven and Hell is a great song. And I forget, is Turn Up the Night on that one, or is Turn Up the Night on Mob Rules?
That's the opener on Mob Rules. Great song.
So I'm thinking of Neon Nights. That's on Heaven.
There you go.
Yes, because those two songs are pretty similar, really. Driving heavy songs.
Oh yeah,
that
fast
lead off the albums. Yep. So they're
move.
Great. But yes, Heaven and Hell is one of the best songs of all time. And my number 3, excuse me, is The Last in Line from 1984. Yes, I love that album. And my number 2 is the album we talked about today, Rainbow Rising from 76. As I've already said, I love that album. So you can guess what's left, I guess. My favorite Dio album is, or Dio on an album, is Holy Diver from 1983. As yes, I love that album too. Don't Talk to Strangers, like you said, Stand Up and Shout. I mean, yes, it's awesome album.
So good. Yeah.
So that's it. I gotta mention, do you want to mention anything else about Rainbow or Dio or anything?
Yeah, I probably Rainbow, I probably couldn't say too much on. I do like them, but as you can tell, like the Dio and the Dio Sabbath era, like definitely that kind of resonated a bit more with me. But I would say the only thing I would say, and I guess this is geared more towards our younger, listeners or viewers on the Metal Pit, is you got to definitely sink your teeth into some early Dio, Holy Diver, Last in Line, Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell, and Mob Rules are mandatory. All 4 of those. But that's really about it, man. I had a fun time. Thanks for the last minute invite. I've been looking forward to doing a podcast. This is one I didn't expect. I got to admit, I was expecting more of a Metallica, Megadeth, Overkill, more of a thrash release, but I was at the ready. So thanks again.
Well, yeah, since it was last minute, I remembered you liked this album.
I do.
I remembered that. I thought, okay, this would be kind of easy to do. I didn't even remember it was only 6 songs on it when I mentioned it, so that did make it a little easier that there's only 6 songs.
Fair point. Yeah.
But yeah, but I know I love this album, so I thought, well, this will be easy to do. Of course, if you would have said no, I would have thought something else. But but anyway, yeah. Now I know I don't really have. I know one of my future episodes, I'm not sure if it's going to be my next one. It depends who I hear from first. But I am going to be talking to a guitarist from a band in Finland, and he wanted to do an Iron Maiden album. And you're going to be disappointed in this, but he wanted to do Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. But I told him I don't really like that album.
Well, can I come on with you guys? I was going to say, can I come on with you guys?
No, so I asked him, would you mind doing a different one? So we're going to do Fear of the Dark. Yes, we're going to do Fear of the Dark. Because we've already did the first 5 Iron Maiden albums, so I don't want to do a repeat. Sure. So I told him to pick a different album that I didn't dislike or whatever. So yeah, so that's coming up, and I'm not going to mention his name because I can't remember right now. Sorry, Topi Pitkanen, I think is his name, from the band Swan Song. He's going to be on a future episode, maybe the next one. And now I have changed also. I didn't mention this at the start, but I've changed the release date for the episode. It's going to be every Saturday now instead of every Wednesday. So we kind of went a week and a half without an episode. But like I say, I got guests coming up. It's just scheduling conflicts. And sometimes I got to get up at 7 in the morning to do a podcast because, Finland is 7 hours later. So I like to do podcast 10 o'clock at night usually, but I can't really ask somebody in Finland, can you get up at 4 in the morning and 5 in the morning and do a podcast with me?
That'd just be wrong.
Like that. So anyway, again, check out our website, themetalpit.org, and follow us on Instagram on the Metal Pit and on the Metal Pit podcast. I just started that like a few days ago. So if you're on Instagram, follow us there. And like everything and subscribe on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. So thanks, Eric, again for joining me. And thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next week.